Quiet on the set. And action.
Welcome to Media and Monuments Podcast, presented by Women in Film and Video in Washington, D.C. Media and Monuments is conversations featuring industry pros speaking on a wide range of topics of interest to media makers.
Welcome, everyone, to our Halloween episode. In this episode, it'll be the co-hosts to talk all things spooky in the film world. So we'll first introduce ourselves. I am one of the co-hosts, Tara Jabbari, and I love horror films. It's one of my favorite genres.
I'm Candice, another one of our three rotating co-hosts. I love Halloween. I come at the film thing more from loving Halloween and costumes and all of that. So I like Halloween movies, which does include some horror and thriller suspense type ones. But so I'm not as obsessed with horror as Tara, but I love Halloween.
I'm Sandra, and unlike my other two co-hosts, I am not a fan of the horror genre. I like the candy part of the Halloween. So I'm more of the suspense, Alfred Hitchcock, and I would have to say the Twilight Zone shows.
Okay, so you don't like gore then, right?
No, that's not for me. And I know that some people love that. In fact, actually about a few years ago before the pandemic, they actually did a Wednesday one where people came to learn more about doing horror movie makeup. And the audience was packed. There were so many people who wanted to get into doing this type of makeup for the horror movies.
We had done a short survey before recording, and at the end, we'll do shout outs to those who did the survey. So if you did the survey or if you're interested in knowing the results, be sure to listen to the whole episode. But first, I wanted to go over a personal anecdote of a horror film that you've been through. So I'll go first. The Exorcist. I remember renting the VHS at Blockbuster when we were like 11, and the two girls sleeping over at my place like, oh, you haven't seen it? You have to watch it. And for some reason, the VHS, it was definitely rewounded because be kind, rewind. And it started with a behind the scenes. So I actually watched all of the behind the scenes as it was like 20-minute documentary. And then the film started. And I'm like, what the hell are you guys bringing to me? Her face turns. There were sexual innuendos that we didn't get because we were 11. And, you know, like it was weird. I'm like, oh, she looks like a spider going down the stairs, all sorts of stuff. I was terrified. And I lasted about, well, it's a long movie, but when she starts going up and down the bed is when I flipped out and I was like, absolutely not. And then years later, I ended up going to Georgetown University for graduate school, and my classes were always in Car Barn, which is right next door to the staircase, which is next door to the house. So I have gone up and down those stairs and I'm like, it's not even scary to me. I'm just annoyed because I have to get to class and there's no way to get down from Wisconsin. You have to go up the stairs. And then a couple years later, a friend of mine who also was traumatized by The Exorcist, she and I had been living in DC and I've been living in Georgetown. So we rented the movie Bravely during daylight and we watched it. And now we call it a romantic comedy because I'm like, a lot of romantic comedies have copied this. That demon is flirting with that priest so much. Come on now.
I don't remember enough of the specifics, but I do know that for those of our listeners that aren't in the DC area, there are those famous exorcist steps. It's pretty much anyone who goes to Georgetown for the first time says, have you seen the exorcist steps? And I remember that was one of the first things I heard about that area as well. So it's a notorious horror movie connection there.
And that house has a huge gate because they've been bothered so much by fans and stuff. But it's a different, so that's my personal anecdote. I'm no longer scared of that movie. And also it did help to see like how they did the different makeup and the voice poor woman had to chain smoke and use a mic. So then what's the point of the mic anyway, so it kind of helped, but then I was older and wiser. So now, Candice, do you want to tell your?
Sure. I mean, so I don't have a specific one necessarily, but I do know, speaking of what you were just kind of piggybacking off of what you said, I do remember growing up thinking if a movie was ever too scary that I would just mute it. And that I also liked learning about how, I mean, I've had a fascination with how films are made and created my whole life. So the behind the scenes really helps take the scary away from it when you can kind of pause and sometimes think, oh, look how they did that makeup. And if I can pull myself out of a film if I need to, if I'm starting to get a little too scared. And muting it is always the best way to do it because I know that horror, the genre, is so firmly locked in sound. Like there's so much of the soundtrack builds the suspense and the fear and all of that. So I always had that as a security blanket of sorts if I got too scared. But that said, I have a very vivid imagination. So I always assumed I was going to be more scared by movies than I actually ended up being when I started watching more horror movies. I was just kind of like, no, I don't think I'm going to like it. So I would avoid them because there's so many other films to watch. But then when I started watching them, and maybe I was older at the time too, they really don't scare me now. I'm also very desensitized to the violence and gore at this point in my life. Although having said that, I do have a memory that's tied to a specific film, which is The Sixth Sense, where when that came out, I was already a teenager, but I still remember that after the fact, because it was kind of what I like to consider like slightly plausible, like psychological, is more, that scares me way more than jump scares and gore. Like if someone gets their head chopped off or whatever, who cares for me? But if it's something that feels like a ghost or something, it scares me. So I do remember one time thinking about the movie right after seeing it and getting so petrified, peeking into the hallway outside of my bedroom and thinking, I remember in the movie, the ghosts and spirits or whatever, you knew they were around if they were cold. Like you could feel cold in the air. So I was like, as long as I feel super hot, I'm safe. And so I just get really, really warm so that I could make sure that I wasn't going to see some dead person walk down the hall. So that's, but now I watch it and all these other movies and even older ones and they don't really scare me now. But that's my story.
That's a good one. I also wanted to prefix that there might be spoilers. I cannot control this conversation.
That's true. So. Well, we can do our best to not spoil things that have come out in the last like few years.
Yeah.
But things that have been out for decades, I think those should be fair game at this point.
Sandra, what's your personal anecdote?
My personal anecdote is something that happened about 10 years ago. My brother-in-law and I were watching a movie that he had picked. And the name of the movie is called The Devil. And there was a scene where you didn't know of all these 6 or 7 people were in this elevator, which one was the devil. And then the lights would go out in this movie scene and then someone would die and you didn't know who did it. But everybody was in the elevator and then one by one, different people were dying because you didn't know which one was the devil. So I saw that movie. I was enormously scared. I didn't like it. My brother-in-law thought it was hilarious. A few days later, I'm at Heathrow Airport on my way to go see my grandmother. And then in the airport at Heathrow, the elevator is going up and it suddenly stops.
Oh, no.
And I just thought, oh, my God. I turned, I put my back up against the wall, and I looked at all the people in the elevator. And all I could sense was, oh, no, it's the devil movie all over again. And then finally waited. And then I thought, it was the lights were going to go out. What was going to happen? Finally, after about 10 minutes, the elevator started working again. I got off, I took my suitcase, I ran towards the tube and just to jump on. I was so scared.
Ooh, well, that'll really lock it in, that fear. You were scarred.
I just want to clarify that the movie's just called Devil, not The Devil. Because I was like, oh, there's another movie, but you're right. It's Devil. And
sorry, I didn't mean
every time I go in
anybody on the different wrong movie title. No.
I love it. And I actually thought I could introduce it to my mother who doesn't like horror films. I'm like, it's more like a thriller. And she's like, I hate this.
No,
I feel like I have to see it now.
It's so good. But every time I go in an elevator and sometimes with my friend who I know, friends who love the movie too, we always look at each other when a bunch of strangers come in too. And we're like, devil. I also got super excited. I'm like, Sandra, did you see somebody from the movie? Because I love those guys. Miss Congeniality, the woman who wins, is in Devil, just so you know.
Okay.
I just spoiled a comedy, not even the movie, like a horror movie. So, okay. So one of the things that we wanted to do is also give some facts. And Sandra, you kindly did some research about the horror genre and stuff like that. Can you share what you found?
Well, the horror movie genre is, according to The Wrap, is a $1 billion industry. This is as of 2017. So one of the things is that the genre itself is pretty easy to do and so it doesn't cost a lot to make these movies. So that's one of the reasons why some people, when they first get into the business, will make these movies because they're fairly cost effective to make. So it's a $1 billion industry, and it's not a lot of output by big name actors or big name location places. So the first Halloween film that was out with Jamie Lee Curtis, that was in 1979. And that movie, it cost $325,000 to make that movie. And then it ended up making $47 million U.S. box office.
At that time?
At that time. It took
Oh
over 17 days to shoot. 47 million U.S. box office.
Wow.
Yeah.
And it launched the career of Jamie Lee Curtis.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And yeah, she's been all the promotions that we've seen for the most recent one, which ends that franchise, of which, do you know how many movies are in that?
About
one?
12 or 13, I believe.
Yeah, it's like a lot of
Well,
movies.
Michael Myers, the killer in that one, is in a couple other franchises. But I thought Halloween and Michael Myers, or maybe it was just with Laurie, the Jamie Lee Curtis, there's 6. I think. Anyway, it's a lot.
Okay.
Right. And she's saying it is the last one. And so a couple weeks ago, she was on one of the late night shows, Jimmy Kimmel, and he had her sign some documents saying, yes, this is the last one. I will not be in any more Halloween films. But
Yeah. Well, they're certainly wrapping it up nicely because all of the promos are about sort of the touching
But have you
whole
guys
journey.
watched it?
I've seen the original Halloween. I might have seen one of the others in between. I think that as someone who has a pretty discriminating taste on quality of films, a lot of horrors to me, I find them kind of boring and stupid. So it was a little bit slow. It didn't really hold up for me. And if, again, at this point, if horror films, because of how spoiled we've gotten in recent days with like realism, like I just watched Psycho the other day kind of to prepare for this. And to me, the absurdly sterile violence, just it's hilarious to me. It becomes more of a comedy. I'm like, wow, 3 drops of blood and you were stabbed to death. Okay, sure. So to me, it's like a lot of those older movies at the time, I'm sure were great successes and like a whole shocking thing. But coming at it now, it's really hard for me to take them seriously. So I'll appreciate parts of it, but I'm not even remotely scared.
can I just give you one trivia question on the Halloween franchise? So which housewife of Beverly Hills starred in the original Halloween and is in also Halloween End?
Ooh, I don't watch the Real Housewives stuff.
I don't watch it either, but I did watch Halloween Ends, and I will be proud to say that it sucked. So it was really disappointing. I don't know who's the Real
in
Housewife.
the original Halloween, Lori goes to babysit 2 kids. Well, the little girl is Kyle Richards. And then she is in a very small scene in Halloween End, and she's wearing bangs, which is not normally what she wears. So anyway, it's Kyle Richards.
Oh, I like that.
I
Yeah.
appreciate the book ending that this franchise is doing,
Yeah.
that it's keeping certain things throughout.
They tried it
Nice.
with Halloween H2O.
That's one I
they-
saw, I think.
That's with Josh Hartnett and Michelle Williams. And it was fine. And then they brought it back and said that never happened. And so they did the these last 3 films with Jamie Lee Curtis. But yeah, it was one of the problems with these franchises is, I will say this is slight spoiler. They introduced a whole new character in Halloween Ends, and it concentrates on this character's arc for the majority of the film, only that they die. And I'm like, okay, so then what was the point? Versus if you're going to make a conclusion about the family, like the Myers family, and stuff. So it was bizarre. I was like, because I prepped to watch it for this. So I'm just.
I have seen quite a lot of, well, I've seen a ton of movies, but I've seen a decent amount of Halloween movies. So that actually is kind of a segue into, I know what we're going to talk about coming up is, this time of year, you have all these channels and networks doing, 31 days of Halloween, and there's all these Halloween and horror movies. And I've seen maybe about half of the ones that come out, and because I do like Halloween movies, so Nightmare Before Christmas, and I'll watch all of them. I've seen a lot of the ones like Hocus Pocus, Hocus Pocus 2, Beetlejuice, Witches, Practical Magic. Like there's so many things that are not scary horror films, but they are specifically Halloween films, and I tend to like those a little bit better. Also, maybe because they're not the like sort of quick thrasher, corny kind of horror thing where there's maybe just not as much emphasis on quality or entertainment. But I don't know. But to me, I like when the humor is intentional and not there because it's just so bad.
Yeah, I guess. Well, we'll get into some of these lists that talk about some of the best horror films. A lot of these are indie films that I appreciate because it's more internal struggles or psychological, and that messes you up. That's more than if it's just stab, stab, bloody, bloody. But Sandra, did you have any other kind of fun facts to share?
Well, actually, Candice mentioned Psycho, and I did want to mention there was a remake of Psycho done about 1998. So that starred the Norman Bates character was Vince Vaughn.
Yeah.
And then the Janet Leigh character, who is Jamie Lee Curtis's mother, that in the remake in 1998, Anne Heche.
The shot-by-shot remake.
Right.
And it just, it doesn't work out.
No.
They all admitted it, too.
Yeah.
Julianne Moore is in it. All sorts, and you would be like, "How can this suck? It worked before."
Well, I mean, I'll tell you why. I mean, I don't know if it's spoilers, but the story itself was just really dumb. I mean, I remember watching it, going in with pretty neutral expectations. Watching it, getting ready for this, and seeing some others. I was like, I gotta check off a few more of the classics. And like, there's like a dumb plot point that doesn't mean anything at the beginning, and the character's just kind of an idiot. Like. Just to me, I just was so frustrated by so much of it being just a horrible story. I do think that the guy who played Norman Bates did a really good job, and there were cute actors and some interesting things about it, and I can appreciate that at that time how some things were really risque and all that. But I just the story itself to me was just not good. So if you're making it again in this day and age and you're doing shot for shot, like you're not improving on the story anymore, I don't know why you wouldn't take it as an opportunity to improve something.
And that's the thing. It was one of the first films where Janet Leigh was the biggest star out there, and then you kill her within the first 30 minutes. And you're like, well, then what the hell did I just sign up for? So that was a shock. But when you're making a remake of such a thing, you're like, well, obviously Anne Heche is going to not go past the 30-minute mark, and shocker, that happens, because it's a shot-for-shot remake. I will say that one of the films that came up this year called Barbarian, it reminds me of Psycho because you think you're watching one and then it turns into something else, and it far exceeded our expectations. And we're like, I don't even want to tell you more about it. If you really like horror films, this is one for the books, and it is now being considered one of the best horror films ever made.
I really, really loved Get Out. I thought Nope was terrible, but I really loved Get Out. Like I also, to be honest, I don't know if it's considered a horror, but I really loved Promising Young Woman. To me, that was a horror film.
I loved that one.
It was so good. And so I like the nuance of some of the ones that came out recently, and that was pretty good. And or like a twisty thing, like some of the Cloverfield things where it's like a different take, or even I can appreciate and respect when Blair Witch Project came out, that it was a whole new style. So like I think I even watched some of Hereditary, but to me it was like, not that great. It was kind of shock value on some things, but I knew it was going to be
It's a
shocking.
very internal, like it makes you question yourself and your own family. And I think that's harder to pull off. It's also one of the things is when people start talking about it, scene by scene, shot by shot, it ruins the movie when you finally watch it. I think.
Well,
you have to watch,
I think
you
it
have
could
to
go either
experience
way.
it
Yeah,
yourself.
I think if I like to watch films fresh, but sometimes if it wasn't the best, hearing more and understanding and contextualizing things and getting a little bit more behind the scenes on it sometimes will improve it. And then you watch it again and you appreciate it a little bit more. But especially when it's things that like twists and turns are part of the enjoyment of watching something. Yeah, if something's going to come out and there's going to be some twist ending, I definitely try to see it before too many people ruin it. It's like, I want to be able to safely move about the internet without any spoilers. So I try to watch things fast if it is going to be a big thing like that.
And going back to the film, and a lot of people got their start in horror, mostly actors, I think, but it's a good challenge for writers and directors and
makeup
sound
artists and
market,
costume,
all that,
sets.
because it's there. I was always taught like it's a hard thing to pull off. So if you do get it right, congrats. If you do it wrong, people who love this genre will still love it because they love to hate these movies too.
Yeah.
So there's a kind of a win-win. And also famously, so Halloween was super cheap to make and blew box office records. Blair Witch Project
Another one.
and Paranormal Activity, both of which were handheld cameras.
Well, actually, and I think the
Right.
Blair Witch Project was actually done here in Montgomery County in the state of Maryland,
Yeah.
from what I remember.
Yeah, I remember that.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
So we did a little bit of a list of some famous Halloween-liked theme films like Edward Scissorhands,
I loved
Hocus
it.
Pocus.
That was fun. Mm-hmm.
Beetlejuice,
Fun.
Ghostbusters,
Fun.
Ghostbusters, yeah, classic.
Buffy the Vampire Slayer. So have you guys seen all of these?
I haven't seen Buffy
Haven't
because I'm
seen
not a
Buffy.
Buffy fan.
Oh, I loved that movie. And
Well,
I
see,
loved the
to
show.
me, and then I don't know if I'm going to sound like a snob or anything here, but to me, Buffy is in that category of like the sort of lower quality TV show type things where like CW Network had a lot of things where, there's people that love soap operas, right? And it to me kind of feels like some horror movies where it's kind of fast and cheap, but people like it for different reasons. I don't like them. And then there are some TV shows that I feel like there's not as high a production quality value or just a lower quality. And to me, I don't like them as much. So it's like a taste thing. So there are some really, really popular, franchises and things like that in the TV world that have also gone over to film, like even Doctor Who. I'm like, it's not really for me, but I can understand that if people get really into it, they like it for other reasons and there's kind of loyalty to that. I just never got into it. So I had no real reason to watch Buffy the Vampire Slayer. And there's so many things that come out in this genre that I would honestly be more inclined to watch like the kids movies for Halloween, because I think some kids movies are fantastic. So like I would watch things like that more so than Buffy.
So really quickly, because it came out this year, did you guys all see Hocus Pocus 2?
I have not seen
Yes.
Hocus Pocus 2 yet, but I did like Hocus Pocus 1.
I rewatched Hocus Pocus in preparation for this, and it's such a delightful film. And then I watched Hocus Pocus 2 the next day. It's not a bad movie, in my opinion, but it does not match with Hocus Pocus. It is not their Godfather Part 2. Let's just put it that way.
Well, it's funny because I didn't rewatch Hocus Pocus, the first one. because it comes out every October all over the place. I've seen snippets of it again over the last few years. And to me, I'm like, it's whatever. And so I went into Hocus Pocus 2 with very low expectations and was pleasantly surprised that it wasn't as bad as I was bracing for.
So, Sandra and listeners, if you haven't seen Hocus Pocus 2, maybe watch it, but don't rewatch the first one right before, because then you'll be disappointed.
Sure, yeah.
I think
Leave it at
that's
that.
a fair.
I think that in the new one, like the casting of the younger versions of the sisters was really great, and
yeah.
You know, they had. I'm always like looking at the casting and the sets and all that stuff because you know we're the media maker types. That's what we do.
Well, so we also have a couple lists of best horror films in the last decade.
Oh, cool.
So from 2012, 2010 to present day.
You got a few there?
And I'll go really quickly.
Yeah, no, that sounds good.
A Quiet Place.
Oh, Quiet Place.
Have
I
you
saw
guys
the
watched
first
it?
one. Yes.
I saw both of those and I thought they were very good.
They're well done. Hereditary.
I saw. I think I saw most of it, and I ended up having to leave because I wasn't even supposed to be in the theater then. And so I had a friend explain the last like 30 minutes of it, and I was like, oh yeah, I'm kind of glad I didn't sit through the rest of that. It just seemed like it got more and more and more bizarre. But I did get through the shocking scene that people talk about, Yeah, which I won't spoil. I'm not going to spoil because it's too recent. But yeah.
But it is, the reviews are saying it's a truly scary look at grief, depression, and family. So if you have family issues, maybe don't watch it. If you do and you want some catharsis, I still don't think you should watch it.
Everyone has some sort of family issue.
This one's a whole other realm of its own.
Yeah.
Cam is a Netflix original. Do you guys know about this? It's an indie film. And I haven't watched it, but I've wanted to. And it's a girl who wants to be a camera girl.
A cam girl.
Like OnlyFans before OnlyFans. So you can see her life and stuff. Because I studied how technology and media has impacted our lives in this more digital age. So I'm intrigued by that. But yeah, I haven't seen it and I've been wanting to. Gerald's Game, the Stephen King book turned film that came out on Netflix. It's considered one of the best Stephen King novels turned horror films. And it came out, I think, 2-3 years ago. It's quite
well. Just to say, I mean, Stephen King, that brings up, I mean, obviously you have, Alfred Hitchcock movies, and then you also have Stephen King movies. Like there's definitely the M. Night Shyamalan movies. There's all these creators of the stories that are their kind of franchise in and of itself, like that particular director or whatever.
It Comes at Night, which is a post-apocalyptic horror film.
I think I've heard of it, but I haven't seen it.
Funny story. So my friends and I love horror films. We hadn't watched a horror film in a theater together before. So we were like so excited. We were going to go watch this. And we wanted to get scared and jump scares. This is not that movie. So we came out disappointed, but it is a good movie. Just don't expect to get jump scares.
Yeah, because there is that difference between jump scares and psychological scares. And that's the thing. The jump scares, it reminds me of any time I've gone through a haunted house or Halloween Horror Nights or whatever. I'm constantly bracing for the jump scare and like waiting and assuming where it might be. So when it happens, it's not quite as much. But then you kind of get excited when someone does get you. You're like, well done. It's a challenge. But yeah, that's not as scary. It's more of like a quick release of endorphins or whatever. And then after that, it dissipates. But the psychological ones, that's the one where you watch it, don't really care so much then, and it's a slow burn. It'll get you later.
Well, so one that I agree should and did win Best Original Screenplay, Get Out.
Yeah, Get Out I thought was really, really good.
But Get Out, what I really appreciate when you hear about do you guys know how he thought of the film? Mm-mm. Which I thought was quite interesting. And this is why I like learning these facts, because as a storyteller, you hear how people get inspired to write these. So Jordan Peele is now married to, I think her name's Chelsea Peretti, who is a white woman and he is Black. But when they were dating, he had the same conversation that's in the film where he's like, do your parents know that I'm Black? She's like, I didn't tell them, but do you want me to? And so that was one thing. And then it was around the time that for his first term, President Barack Obama had won the election, and people naively would go and they're like, racism is over. And he's like, it is not over by any means. So
not even a little bit.
Not even a little bit. And so these two kind of things that were happening on, he created Get Out, which is a interracial couple go visit his white girlfriend's family and things go weird. And it's very well done, but I really liked that seemingly like a presidential election, your personal life, you know, they can like to combine it, and then it speaks to so many other people. I thought was a really great example of why stories are great and films are great.
Oh, yeah.
The Witch.
No.
It's a very, I've seen it. I was bored and I get yelled at when I say that. People love it.
I know the feeling because I do that with a lot of classics. I'm like, kind of sucked. And they're like, what? But it's so good. So,
Train to Busan, which is a South Korean film, which is a zombie film. I've seen it multiple times. I love it. And there was a sequel and I need to get my hands on it.
I do, speaking of zombies, I do remember really liking World War Z and Zombieland.
Oh, yeah.
The Warm Bodies was also really cute, based on Romeo and Juliet, but also involving zombies.
So would you consider that kind of like your Halloween fun?
Well, that's a thing I wanted to kind of bring up is, you know, when you think of Halloween movies, obviously you've got horror, but then when you think of the other ones, there's kind of those classic costumes, you know, like witch, ghost, zombie, vampire, you know, and those, once you start doing some of those, that's how you get a lot of these Halloween-esque movies, you know, like anything involving vampires or werewolves or ghosts, or, you know, then it automatically becomes a Halloween movie because it's one of the sort of top 5 of classic costumes, you know?
Yeah.
I'm sure if there's something involving pumpkins, it would be a Halloween movie as well, because that is the symbol of Halloween.
I'm just going to mention, so A Girl Walks Home Alone at Night is a vampire movie that came out in the last 10 years. And it's a Persian-speaking film. I have seen it. And something that took me out of it, it's supposed to take place in Iran. They filmed it in Southern California because we call it Tehrangeles anyway. There's a lot of us there. And so it kind of bugged me. And my cousin and I were watching it and we're like, I cannot get into this because women, you're saying you have to wear a veil because you're in Iran. No, you're not. You're in San Diego. I don't know if they're in San Diego, but you know what I mean? So it took me out of that film. Sort of like how, Candice, you were like, if I can't, I focus on these details.
It's really hard to ignore some of those things. I mean, and also, I don't know if you guys get this as well, but from places living in the DC area, you know, a lot of times it's one of the towns in that gets into media a lot, you know, and movies set here, just like a lot of things are set in New York or whatever. So people in small towns might not have that same issue, but we constantly, when something is set where you live, you're constantly checking to see if it's accurate. And so sometimes you're like, oh my gosh, that jog
Halloween
is completely impossible, you know. So it's those types of things that you have that, you know, you really need to work harder to suspend your disbelief on, and it can really draw you out of the film. But I did want to say with the foreign film aspect that, yeah, there's a lot of great ones. I know you've seen a lot of them. I'd like to see more, so I'd love to get some recommendations from you. We
got that coming up in the surveys. And I just wanted to say, like, Halloween, the original, is supposed to take place in the suburbs of Chicago. And the second she goes outside of her high school, it's like in 5 minutes, there's palm trees. And we're like, BS. There are no palm trees in Illinois.
Right. She's wearing like a sweater and she's wearing plaid. And yeah, they've got these old cars that, you know, they say they go through
Halloween time would be a lot where, you wouldn't just walk around in a t-shirt or a button-down shirt like one character for a while. Right. Even if it is just a brisk walk.
There were so many lists of the best horror films of all time. Some things will keep coming up, so I'll just really quickly name them. The Shining.
Yes.
Classic. Yeah.
Halloween. Psycho, The Exorcist, Alien, Jaws, Silence of the Lambs, Rosemary's Baby. And then you get into, would you guys agree that these are pretty good?
Yeah, I mean,
like
I
all
haven't
of
seen a
those.
couple of them, but I mean, anything that really gets the suspense going, like Jaws did a really good job, obviously, which I love that half the reason it was so suspenseful was because the animatronic shark didn't work as often as they wanted it to. So they had to do a lot more building with the like just not knowing what's there. And that's the thing. The human mind can make things way scarier than seeing something. So that's why the sound is so important in these as well.
Yeah.
It like gets your heart racing, and what you're imagining is always way worse than what it is in life in general half the time.
One film that it keeps coming up, and I finally actually watched in a couple of years ago, was The Thing with Kurt Russell. Have you guys seen it?
Is that well? Isn't there also like the original, like The Thing from way back?
Yeah, is that a remake of like a 50s movie? They did a remake recently, and apparently it's terrible. I haven't watched it. But the one with Kurt Russell, they're in like Antarctica, and an alien has come there, and now it's the thing that can transform into anybody. But then they realize that the blood reacts differently to something. So
That's another thing. Anything involving aliens is also considered a Halloween movie.
yeah. So one of the most anticipating things is they're like, we will test each other's blood on this little thing. And it's not gory. Well, if you hate the sight of blood, but it's literally just a little bit of prick on the finger, and then they all bleed a little bit. And then you're waiting one by one whose blood would react, or does any of them? Scream came up. I love it. And it,
Oh, yeah, I never saw any of those Scream movies. I think that was during the time when I feel like I should, because they're classic. But I feel like when they were coming out was when I was very staunchly in this horror scary movies aren't my thing. So I just
dare
didn't
you,
see them.
Candice? First of
I've
all,
watched so many other movies. I was just watching
all
other
those
things.
Films have beautiful sweaters. Yes, they get soaked in blood, but they have the most gorgeous sweaters.
Well, at least if there's more blood, it sounds like something I would enjoy better.
And it kind of had a fun, it talks about all the classics from the 70s and 80s and stuff like that.
I'll watch them. Doing this special, this Halloween special, has reinvigorated my need to watch a lot of the classics. Because this time of year they all come back out in force.
I'll mention a
it's good
couple of
reminder.
the Alfred Hitchcock classics. There's Strangers on a Train, 1951. There's The Birds from 1963.
I really want to see that next.
With Cary Grant. There's Rope. 1948, where the murder happens in the first 5 seconds. They put the body in the trunk and then ask the parents to come over for dinner when their son's in the trunk dead. There's Vertigo, Dial M for Murder, Rear Window. Rear Window is Jimmy Stewart.
That's a great one.
I've seen that one.
Grace Kelly has the most amazing clothes in that one. And that actually is supposed to take place in an apartment complex here in Washington, D.C. And then, of course, there's Psycho.
Another DC.
So those are just a couple of those that, to mention that.
There's so many films in the world, so many. So you can pick a genre and just you'd never finish seeing them all, no matter what. I mean, it's really hard. But I promise you guys, I will watch more horror movies and just thriller and suspense and Halloween movies.
Well, I wanted to go through the survey.
Oh, yeah. Tell us about the survey. What did people say?
So first, I'm going to ask you guys the question. You'll answer really quickly, and then I'll give you guys some of the top answers. Your favorite horror franchise? There were Friday the 13th, Conjuring, Saw, Jaws, Nightmare on Elm Street, other.
I'd say other because I don't know.
I'm going to have to take a pass on that.
Okay. Well, Friday the 13th got the most votes with, and then Jaws, then Nightmare on Elm Street, and others came up were Scream, which now saying it, I was like, oh, duh.
Should have put that on the survey.
Halloween. Actually, I think Halloween was a question. I forgot about that. And actually, somebody put, you know what? Mortal Remains, because the sequel is coming. I did a little research, and the person who wrote that in is one of the producers of Mortal Remains, and it's coming up. So good job. It's on crypticpictures.com if you want to know more. All right. Your favorite non-scary but Halloween-like movie? Casper, Hocus Pocus, Beetlejuice, Practical Magic, Harry Potter franchise, The Night Before Christmas.
Oh, I like the Harry Potter franchise. I could definitely watch those. Yes.
Yeah, that's a hard one. I'm terrible at picking favorites. I'd say it's maybe of those options, a tie between the Harry Potter films, Practical Magic, and Nightmare Before Christmas.
I would say Hocus Pocus was mine, but Harry Potter was number one. And then Hocus Pocus, Beetlejuice, and Practical Magic, and Nightmare Before Christmas all were tied. So that was interesting. Some other films that came up was Paranorman, Poltergeist, Young Frankenstein, and Addams Family.
Oh yeah, Addams Family is a classic as well.
So then no one mentioned Interview with a Vampire?
Yeah, I was going to say they're redoing that as a series now,
No
and
one
I feel like
mentioned
it's like very trendy. Well, they're pretty classic. They've always been around. You've got
Yeah.
True Blood and Vampire, as the whole thing too coming back, and there's all sorts of classic vampire movies. I guess I hesitate to say Twilight because they're just so lame, but apparently those are vampires too. Yeah, but there's all these.
Sparkle that they
Yeah,
are.
I'm sorry. If you're not eating people, you're not a vampire. But like, it's just, but no, there's all of those. There's a ton. Like vampires have been one of the most classic and sustaining of all of those. I mean, from like Nosferatu and Dracula and like all these things going like original vampire movies all the way up to now. It's constantly it's like a really good staple of the Halloween time genre because vampires are sort of, get the sexy part too, so it keeps it in that whole, because I will say horror oftentimes pairs with like sex appeal stuff too. There's usually like, a shirt rips off and you got boobs as well as blood.
Right.
There's always that kind of element of like sex with horror. You
like
see a
how-
lot.
For those who are listening, you guys can't watch this, but Sandra has just been nodding no for
shaking her head
last
this whole
45
time.
minutes. The whole time.
Not her jam. So Sandra's representing people that, have to survive the Halloween October onslaught of horror and Halloween films when it's not everyone's cup of tea.
Do you guys have a favorite horror theme? The options were sci-fi / aliens, supernatural, slasher, or other.
I'd say thriller, like things that are good, suspenseful. Is probably good because then it involves some psychological stuff. I don't know.
I would agree. That would be my favorite. Sandra?
Yes, and that's one of the reasons why I like the Alfred Hitchcock, the suspense.
Yeah.
I do like those. And any Agatha Christie, Then There Were None, where, the 10 people are on that house out in the middle of the island and one by one they're knocked off.
Yeah, a couple. So sci-fi got number one, supernatural number two. But other ones that came up were psychological thrillers and home invasions. That was another one, which is a good one. It's just scary because it could happen, and I don't like that.
Yeah.
I think I'm going to go through this list because some of these I hadn't seen, but I've heard of. Your favorite foreign horror film, because don't let subtitles ruin the movie for you.
That goes for all genres, people. There
All
are great films that you should watch.
Which actually, Parasite, which is a South Korean film.
I really liked that one. Yeah.
That came up, and I was like, is that a horror film?
Yeah, I mean, it's a suspenseful. Yeah, and there's violence in it. There's suspense. There's.
I love it. I watched it 4 times.
Psychological stuff. Yeah, I think. I mean, honestly, it's a pretty low bar to make it to be a horror or
I guess
Halloween
so, because
film.
I didn't even consider it. Because my personal favorite horror films are foreign horror films: Rec and Rec 2, as in record, but it's REC, and it's Spanish. It's so good. Ugh. They did an American remake. It sucks. Don't watch it. But Rec
Most of the
and
times,
Rec
the
2.
original's the best. So for
The original
for all
and
movies.
a solid sequel. And then one of my favorite twists, which I won't ruin it for you guys, but you could watch it on YouTube, Shutter, which is from Thailand. And it was made like in 2001. And I call the main character Backstreet because he had the like Backstreet Boys in sync hair with his hair kind of like long and covering his eyes. And he's super cute, but there's every time he takes a photo, there's a ghost that's haunting him. And so I was like, Backstreet, watch out, and stuff. But they did do actually 4 remakes, 3 in India and 1 American. And I haven't gotten my hands on them, but also they all got terrible reviews. Shudder is really a great film. But if I keep talking about it, I will spoil it. Some other ones. Train to Busan. Again, I love it. South Korean. A lot of Korean films come up. Piggy, which actually came out this year. I had just seen the trailer, but I hadn't seen it. It's from Spain. Funny Games, which is Austria. And there is an American remake. I refuse to watch it. It's not funny at all. Eyes Without a Face, which is from Italy. And it's pretty old. Nosferatu, the original, is from Germany. Old Boy, which again, I was like, is that a horror film? It's South Korean.
I mean, you could just say all of the Black Mirror episodes are horrors then too.
Yeah, well, but Old Boy, wild twist. If you don't know it, I won't be the one to tell you it. Hostel, which I was like, hold up. I think that's Eli Roth, which is United States. I checked. It is United States, but also Czech Republic.
Oh, okay.
And it's one of the slasher films. I don't really like those, so I haven't watched it. Thirst, which is South Korean. This one bugged me. You'll know. A girl walks home alone at night. It is not Iran. She's a British Iranian woman who filmed in the United States, but it's supposed to take place in Iran. But okay, whatever. The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari, which is a German film. I had never heard of it. The Orphanage, which is from Spain. It is a great one. It's sad. That's why I was like, oh my gosh, yes, that's a great one, but it's sad. Ringo, which is Japanese. And there is a American remake called The Ring. Rashomon, which is from Japan.
That one, right.
And a little somebody.
That's Kurosawa, right? I'm saying his name.
And you're the one who told me this,
Right.
so I added it in.
Yeah, I've seen that. That's fantastic. Yes.
So there's a couple of like go-to favorite horror films. For me, I will say The Others, Rosemary's Baby, 28 Days Later, Conjuring 1 and 2, Wreck 1 and 2. What about you guys?
Well, just to finish the foreign film thing.
I'm sorry, yes.
One of the ones that I really liked, I think it's called Let the Right One In.
Yeah.
It's kind of a vampire thing. Yeah, and they remade it. They remade it, I think, for the US, and I might have seen it, but it was definitely way worse than the original.
And it's turning into a show that's coming out.
Yeah, the original is much better. I really liked it. I thought it was really well done.
Yeah, I can't remember which. It's European.
I don't know if I could say that I have a favorite of the horror genre. Also because anyone who knows me knows I hate picking favorites. I'm so bad at picking favorites because I'm always like, it depends on my mood and it depends on the genre and it depends on this and it depends on, I'm always it depends. I can't just pick the one favorite. Like all of my movies across time, I have to have a unranked top 15 or something all the time. So yeah, I don't have a favorite of that, but I will say Halloween, the holiday, is my favorite holiday.
There you go. See, that's an interesting. Sandra, do you have one that you're like, if I have to watch a scary movie, this is the one I go to?
I wouldn't say that I have any one particular favorite, but I'm going to toss out another movie that had a lot of suspense in it, and that is Black Swan, starring Natalie Portman and Mila Kunis. Again, that suspense aspect of it is what I gravitate towards.
Yeah, that was really good. I like that one.
Well, this is interesting. I asked for the scariest moment or jump scare in a movie. It didn't necessarily have to be a horror film, but there are two that I have. One of mine comes up 3 times, which is The Exorcist 3. The second one apparently is so bad, I didn't even watch it. Nobody should watch it, apparently. The third one, everyone says, is wonderful. And there is a GIF or a GIF of the jump scare. A nun comes out of nowhere in a hospital. It's terrifying. It's awesome. And that came up in the survey. Jaws coming out of the water. Deep Blue Sea, where Samuel L. Jackson gets eaten. that's a spoiler, but it is a really good one. I was like, oh, I guess you could say Deep Blue Sea is a scary movie.
I mean,
Werewolf.
anytime it's really calm and quiet and then they really get you,
Yeah, there was this one scene in Jurassic Park. I think it's the first one. And Wayne Newman, I can't think of what his character is, but he's sitting in the car and the baby Jurassic dinosaur, all of a sudden he's about to, he jumps out of nowhere. And I'm telling you, I was in the movie theater and I literally jumped out of my seat. And I think the baby dinosaur eats him or something. So
eats him or something. Well, The Shining came up on a couple of times. It's Johnny. Here's Johnny. But also when Danny turns the corner and sees the twins at the end of the hallway, that came up. The ending of Carrie with the arm out of the ground. And then I did want to share, this movie is terrible, but the trailer was one of my favorites. It's called The Hatred, and it came out not too long ago. And it's a babysitter. This is the trailer. And I was like, I got to watch this. Babysitter gets called up. The little girl's like, there's someone under the bed. You have to check, please. She's like, there's no such thing as like, all right, I will check under the bed to keep you safe. So she looks under the bed and it's the little girl. And the little girl's like, that's not me.
Oh, and yeah. It's a good preview for a horror movie.
So I watched it and I'm like, what is this BS? It was awful. I lasted 10 minutes and the reviews get so funny. It's called The Hatred and no one likes it. It ended up being Nazis. Why? And it takes place in 2017. What?
Why not?
No.
Hey, Nazis are back. I don't know. It's or they never left. I don't know.
But anyway, at the end, I just wanted to share the shout outs for people who took the survey and anything that they wanted to say. So Rod, Bryce, Haley, Doug, Ryan, thank you for taking the survey. Joe Djokovic, he was saying he's working on a horror movie, Domicidal. So keep an eye out for that. Mark Ritchie, who is one of the producers for Mortal Remains, asks, do you remember Carl Atticus? I checked. That has to do with this sequel. PictureThisVideo.net was asked to be promoted, and it is by a WIF member, and they do great work. Katie from One More Round, the Rocky Series podcast. Thank you, Katie, for taking this. She and I have been on a podcast called The Jacked Up Review Show, and her podcast is really interesting. It's about the Rocky film franchise. Anne Saul of Saul Good Media. She says, life is scary enough. I'll watch the kids' movies. And Tanya Fitzpatrick is the founder of World Footprints, a socially conscious travel platform helping to alleviate a fear of traveling in today's somewhat scary world. And Celia says hi. She is seen in Walking Dead World Beyond. And thank you all for taking the survey. I really appreciate it. Some of these things that came up, I was like, oh my gosh. And I'm glad I'm not the only one to get scared of the nuns scene in Exorcist 3. Do you guys have any last words?
I was just going to say, based on a couple of shout outs, was also another reminder that, yeah, the world itself is pretty scary these days, or it can be, and it has been, especially through some bad times. So that is part of why I didn't watch as many horror films, because I wanted happy, light, fluffy escapism for a while there. But now I'm very much going to get back on the watching all the types train. This has been a lot of fun. There's so many things you can think of. As soon as you start thinking of what is a Halloween movie or a horror movie, a million things start trickling in. Like partway through, I was like, oh, The Craft. And like all these different things just pop into your mind. And so I'm going to keep thinking about stuff and being like, I've seen so many things and there's all this horror and suspense. So it is a very bountiful subject area or genre. So I think anyone can find what they like, whether they like fun and fluffy, cute, comedy, kid, adult, horror, gory. You know, I love that it is a genre that you can find anything. I mean, even Sandra, who hates this genre, loves suspense and likes Hitchcock films. So it's like there's always a slice, there's a lane in this whole world for everyone.
And a counter argument to your point, Candice, I was like, when life gets you down, you can watch a horror film and you're like, thank God I'm not them.
That's true. You can watch something and be like, well, it's not that. Yeah. Like, not to ruin some things, but for example, Fresh, which I brought up, was just another reminder to be like, you know what? maybe if you don't get a date, that's fine, because
that is also one of the better
things could go
films that came out
horribly
this year.
awry. So, yeah.
All right, Sandra, any last words?
I would say I'm glad this episode of the horror genre is over, and I'm looking forward to talking about holiday films coming up in December.
Yes, that's the next one. Thank you all for listening. Thank you to my co-hosts. We'll be back to get to know each other more.
Yeah, so I hope you guys have gotten to know us, your hosts, a little bit better as well, because, we're spending most of our time highlighting the guests, and this is an opportunity for us to get to share a little bit more of our own personalities. And also, I would just like to say Happy Halloween to everyone.
Happy Halloween.
Have fun.
Thank you for listening to Media and Monuments, a service of Women in Film and Video in Washington, D.C. Please remember to review, rate, and subscribe wherever you listen to this podcast. For more information about WIF, please visit our website at WIF as in Frank, V as in Victor.org.